In 1977, a very famous and very excellent model engineer by the name of Tubal Cain serialised in the December of 77 the making of a toy steam crane as a Christmas present for his grandkids or whatever. The basic version of Tubal Cain consisted of a hoisting mechanism made out of Meccano gears, this part here, fixed jib, a boiler and a burner. The power unit was a twin cylinder oscillator with a reversing block so that the hook could go up and down. Of course, I didn't stick to the instructions, why would you? And I fitted an additional cylinder unit and some additional gearing so that the traversing of the crane would be under power. I also made a larger, taller boiler, which was not a good idea, I have to say. I also had various attempts at lubricators and stop valves, which has resulted in all sorts of spurious, extraneous bits and pieces around here. Don't really serve much function. This is the reversing block and the reversing lever for the power unit that controls the turning of the crane. The exhaust from both the lifting cylinders and the turning cylinders is fed into an old tobacco tin with a drain on it, because candidly it makes so much flaming mess if you just leave the exhausts going off to atmosphere or wherever. So I collect the condensate and drain it out of there. It's now November 2018. I haven't run this thing for, I couldn't tell you, probably from the first year I actually made it back in the early 1980s. Got a bit fed up with it and got bored, but I think I've decided to try and remake various aspects to see if it can't be tidied up and improved. And I suppose the first thing to do as part of that process is to attempt to steam it and see if it still actually runs. The burner from scratch has now been alight for 16 minutes. I quite like the way it goes round. Possibly works better than I thought it did actually. Mess. Someone's at the front door. So what have we learned? Well, we've learned that it does work. The burner lasts about 20 minutes. I think improvements that I might make. I think the gauge glass could be a bigger diameter and needs a bit of protection. It looks very vulnerable like that. I think all the extraneous bits and bobs around here, which were various attempts to do I know not what, need removing, and the controls need simplifying. I think I need to look at the bearing arrangement on the base just to make sure that it's as friction free as it can be. I need to think about getting heat into the boiler more efficiently so that it can hold 15 psi, because it works very well at 15 psi, so that the boiler can hold 15 psi consistently and not drop every time. Particularly the rotating mechanism is put on. I think one of the things I might look at is see if I can't shield and lag around the base of the burner. Yeah, so there we go really. Bearing that I made for it, as you can see, only has six rollers, and that causes a bit too much friction because it's quite a heavy thing. So I'm going to add at least another 6 rollers, so there'll be 12 rollers instead of 6, to try and improve its rotational capabilities. And there you go. Now, as you can see, the central hub, whatever you want to call it, was actually machined out of a big nut that I found in my box somewhere. And the base, this, is cast iron, and in fact was cut out from an old disc brake, I think off of a Morris 1800 I used to own, where the discs wore out. So I just cut the hub out of it to use as the base for this crane, and all these holes you can see are to do with the originally bolting the disc brake to the backing plate for the wheel, etc. With hindsight, I kind of wish I'd left a bit of the disc around the outside as well, but I didn't, so there we go. Anyway, so today's task is to see how we can add another 6 rollers onto that hub. I think I'm going to make them semi-floating to try and increase the bearing area and hopefully reduce the friction a bit on the turning motion. So that's the plan, and there we go. Okay, so I hope you can see this. As you can see, I've actually doubled up the number of rollers, I suppose, on the main hub bearing. Not so much to reduce friction, but to reduce the load on each individual roller, and hence the 2 rings on which the rollers run. So we'll see if this works when we get the top of the crane assembled on it. I've taken the boiler off and some of the associated bits. It's clear that I never intended this thing to come apart, and all I can say is it was put together by an imbecile, i.e. me. So I think a great deal of this is potentially going to get thrown away. That was kind of interesting after that initial steam up to see if it would work at all, was the amount of oily condensate in this tobacco tin. It was virtually full up, almost to the brim. That was after the 10 or 12 minutes steaming, so it just goes to show how much wet exhaust these oscillating engines produce. Curious. At this point I've modified the top of the boiler, put a steel plate on top to trap some additional insulation, and I've removed some of what I consider to be surplus pipework around the bottom, but left the main lubricator in position. Notice the piece of knotted string which serves as the lifting cord at this stage. Clearly that got broken back in 1980 when I first made it, and I just left it like that. Find something to pick up really. Not totally sure what. Didn't really think of anything particularly to pick up, so we're going to pick up the adjustable spanner. Why not? And there we are. Well, disaster. See, doesn't like. Be better if it was more evenly distributed, I suppose. Whatever. I don't think he likes the knot in a bit of string on me pulley, ain't right, I don't know which. Not brilliant, but it works. It is after all only a toy, albeit a rather hot one, I have to say. More adventures with the toy steam crane. I removed the gauge glass and fitted in theory a level cock or something, which is now leaking furiously. Probably because the O-ring that sealed it went pinging off into outer space as soon as it got hot. I don't know why it did that. There was a little bit of pressure on it, coming up to looks like 20 psi, which is probably all it ought to run at. So we'll see if it goes. If we open the main steam valve, and clear a bit of condensate. Okay. That's cool. So that's done. Steam around there. Seems to work. I replaced the knotted string with some brass wire, normally used for hanging picture frames, but it seems to work quite well in this application, particularly with a bit of weight on the hook. A bit of a windy day, which isn't doing the burner much good. Still, the fact that it raises steam and goes is a good thing. Quite cold and, as you can see, windy out here today. So the fact that it raises steam at all is quite a good thing, since most of the heat's going somewhere else. Got 20 psi on the gauge.